Again, this is another sign of the times, an analysis, and a commentary. Climate change is intensifying rapidly. The federal government has released a long-awaited report with an unmistakable message. The effects of climate change, including deadly wildfires, increasingly debilitating hurricanes and heat waves, are already battering the United States, and the danger of more such catastrophes is worsening. The report's authors, who represent numerous federal agencies, say they are more certain than ever that climate change poses a severe threat to Americans' health and pocketbooks, as well as to the country's infrastructure and natural resources. And while it avoids policy recommendations, the report's sense of urgency and alarm stand in stark contrast to the lack of any apparent plan from President Donald Trump to tackle the problems, which, according to the government he runs, are increasingly dire. The congressionally mandated document, the first of its kind issued during the Trump administration, details how climate-fueled disasters and other types of worrisome changes are becoming more commonplace throughout the country, and how much worse they could become in the absence of efforts to combat global warming. Already, western mountain ranges are retaining much less snow throughout the year, threatening water supplies below them. Coral reefs in the Caribbean, Hawaii, Florida, and the United States Pacific territories are experiencing severe bleaching events. Wildfires are devouring ever larger areas during longer fire seasons, and the country's sole Arctic state, Alaska, is seeing a staggering rate of warming that has upended its ecosystems from once ice-clogged coastlines to increasingly thawing permafrost tundras. Changes in the relative amounts and timing of snow and rainfall are leading to mismatches between water availability and needs in some regions, the report states, and that poses threats to the future reliability of hydropower production in the Southwest. The report also states that groundwater depletion is exacerbating drought risk in many parts of the United States, particularly in the Southwest and Southern Great Plains. Indigenous communities, often reliant on natural resources for their economic, cultural, and physical well-being, are uniquely affected by climate change, according to the report. Climate change increasingly threatens indigenous communities' livelihoods, economies, health, and cultural identities by disrupting interconnected social, physical, and ecological systems. The National Climate Assessments publication marks the government's fourth comprehensive look at climate change impacts on the United States since 2000. The last came in 2014, produced by 13 federal departments and agencies and overseen by the U.S. Global Change Research Program. The report stretches well over 1,000 pages and draws more definitive, in some cases more startling conclusions than earlier versions. The authors argue that global warming is transforming where and how we live and presents growing challenges to human health and quality of life, the economy, and the natural systems that support us, and they conclude that humans must act aggressively to adapt to current impacts and mitigate future catastrophes to avoid substantial damages to the U.S. economy, environment, and human health and well-being over the coming decades. The impacts we've seen the last 15 years have continued to get stronger, and that will only continue, said a professor of economics and environmental studies at Wesleyan University, who served on a National Academy of Sciences panel that reviewed the report. We have wasted 15 years of response time. If we waste another 5 years of response time, the story gets worse. The longer you wait, the faster you have to respond, and the more expensive it will be. That urgency is at odds with the stance of the Trump administration, which has rolled back several Obama-era environmental regulations and incentivized the production of fossil fuels. Donald Trump has also said he plans to withdraw the nation from the Paris Climate Accord and questioned the science of climate change just last month, saying on CBS's 60 Minutes that "I don't know if it's man-made." Furthermore, as the Northeast faced a cold spell this week, Trump tweeted, "Whatever happened to global warming?" This shows a misunderstanding that climate scientists have repeatedly tried to correct, a confusion between daily weather fluctuations and long-term climate trends. But that's what he is, confusion and chaos. The White House did not immediately respond to a request for comment. However, the administration last year downplayed a separate government report calling human activity the dominant driver of global warming, saying in a statement that the climate has changed and is always changing. Given that history, some of the hundreds of scientists and federal officials who spent months working on the detailed document were frustrated, but not surprised, that the administration chose to release it on the day after Thanksgiving, typically one of the slowest news days of the year. Several people involved in the report said its release had originally been planned for early December. Several federal experts who participated in a media call after the release of the report on Black Friday were repeatedly asked about the timing of its release on a day when the country's attention is likely elsewhere. For the most part, they demurred, saying that in part the report was finished early and they wanted to make sure it was out ahead of both an American Geophysical Union gathering next month, as well as a major international climate conference in Poland around the same time. They implored reporters to focus instead on the contents of the report. In other words, climate change is increasing and it's getting worse rapidly. This too is another sign of the end of times as we know them. Transition days, which is a time of extraordinary events, changes, and happenings. Because it's still about what kind of world are we leaving to the future generations? And that should be a very important question to ask, should it not? Revelation chapter 6, verse 7. And when he had opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth beast say, "Come and see." And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed with him. And power was given unto them over the fourth part of the earth, to kill with sword and destroying weapon, and with hunger, and with death, and with the beasts of the earth. And when he had opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of them that were slain for the word of God, and for the testimony which they held. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, How long, O Lord, holy and true, dost thou not judge and avenge our blood on them that dwell on the earth? And white robes were given unto every one of them, and it was said unto them that they should rest yet for a little season, until their fellow servants also and their brethren that should be killed as they were should be fulfilled. And I beheld when he had opened the sixth seal, And yes, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood, and the stars of heaven fell into the earth, even as a fig tree casts her untimely figs when she is shaken of a mighty wind. And the heaven departed as a scroll when it is rolled together. Every mountain and island were moved out of their places. And the kings and leaders of the earth, and the great men, and the rich men, and the chief captains, and the mighty men, and every working man, and every free man, hid themselves in the dens and in the rocks of the mountains, and said to the mountains and rocks, Fall on us, and hide us from the face of him that sits on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand? Yes, it's time for the physical and spiritual manifestation of the book of Revelation. And all these are more signs